What are 7 key terminology or concept you need to master as a Scrum Master? If for any reason you're not familiar with any of this concept, which I want to discuss, familiar to your fingertip, it's an indication that you're doing something wrong. So sometimes it's not just the fact that we're not getting calls from recruiters or our resume is not right. Sometimes it's also about the fact that you are not prepared because you don't even master what you should know. So in this videos, I'm going to share some of the 7 key words or 7 key terms or 7 key I'll call them performance indicator, which you need to know as a Scrum Master. Number one, which I'm going to discuss today, I'm going to talk about the concept of a sprint or an iteration and what you should master there if you desire to become a Scrum Master or if you are a Scrum Master. So I'm going to play a balance on that. The second concept I'm going to discuss today, I'll talk about the concept of a user story and how it applies to practice in Scrum. And then I'm also going to talk about the concept of story point estimation. Why is it very important? How should pay attention to it? And what are possible ways questions can come up during your interview? Or even when you're working, what are some of the possible confrontation you're going to have while interacting with story estimation? And then I'm also going to talk about capacity allocation or capacity planning. What is it all about and what should you pay attention to that? Okay. And number 5, I'm going to talk about the concept of technical debt as it applies to Scrum. Number 6, I'm going to talk about bugs and defects. Are there differences? Are they the same concept? I'm going to discuss that. And finally, which is the 7th point I'm going to talk about today, which is why you need to stick to the end, I'm going to talk about performance indicators or performance metrics or how you assess yourself and how you assess the performance of your team as a Scrum Master. Okay. So before we get in to start talking about the details, welcome to the Scrum Chat Room with Dr. Francis Mbunya and a happy ending 2022. Couple of days, today's 29. We have 2 more days to roll out into a new year. And I'm wishing everyone a very prosperous 2023. But your 2023, it's only going to make a difference if you start zooming in now, right? And then for those who are interested in joining any of our community or training, we have a safe certification training coming up. It's going to start on Monday, the 2nd of January, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., 4 days. And by the end of the week, you get your certification as a certified Safe Scrum Master. Guarantee that you're going to definitely make it. If you're already in the job market and January period between January and March is a peak period for the market, and you want to practice, get more detail, prepare yourself for the job market. You want to join our school of practice where we teach you what to do to be effective or to succeed in the job market and what to do when you get into the job market. And if you're already in the job market and you're kind of struggling, the best way for you to make reference to is our community of practice. So you just need to reach us with a number on the screen. I'm interested and I'm going to share with you more information on how to get there. Now, without wasting much time, let's get into the detail of our discussion today. I'm super excited for today because it's going to be a very cool conversation, right? Keeping it simple and keeping it real. But one thing again, before we move ahead, tomorrow, which is the 30th, now that's going to be a Saturday, which is the 31st. I'm going to be doing a live at 12 noon Central Time. I will come live. We're going to discuss about what 2023 is bringing into the Agile world. Also, opportunity for you to ask questions and receive answer from me. So note that down. Okay, our first concept for today, we want to talk about a sprint and an iteration. When you hear the word sprint or iteration, what is the first thing that comes to mind? If you, for instance, get on an interview, it's like, what do you understand by a sprint? When we say a sprint, what is it all about? So when we talk about sprint, SPRINT, alternatively, iteration is also called sprint. Now, what's the difference between a sprint and an iteration? Sprint is mostly used in a Scrum environment, and iteration is mostly used in a safe environment, but they mean the same thing. So when you hear about sprint, you hear about a sucker, right? A sucker. So when I say we are working on sprint 5, it means we are working on circle 5. Sprint simply means that we plan in smaller circles. The circle, as recommended by Scrum, can either be a 1-week circle, a 2-week circle, a 3-week circle, or a 4-week circle. But in most of the environment, you are going to find a 2-week circle called a sprint. Why is it called a circle? Because there are a series of events, which are Scrum events, that need to occur within that circle. So after that circle, you start another circle, which is a series of events. And what are these events? We have the sprint planning, we have the daily stand-up, we have the backlog refinement, we have the sprint review and the sprint retrospective. All of this happening in a circle called a sprint or called an iteration. In the case where it's a safe environment, you're going to have iteration planning, we're going to have daily stand-up, backlog refinement, iteration review, and iteration retrospective. The difference is just going to be on the name, but the same thing that's happening in the sprint, whether it's a sprint or an iteration planning, happens in both environment. So anytime you hear about sprint, it means that it's a combination of events happening within a circle. So you can receive a question in an interview like, can you tell me about your life as a Scrum Master within a sprint? I think I did a detailed video on that, what you do from the first day of the sprint to the last day of the sprint. And I'm going to remember to share the link under this video if you want to get a full detail of that. But now you understand what we mean by a sprint if you come across that. Now, the second concept I want to talk about today, I want to talk about a user story. When you hear the concept of a user story, what comes to your mind? Now, I want you to pay attention on two things. One, user, second, story. All right. And if you want to bring it into kind of a practical world, which you might understand, if someone asks you, hey, what's your name? And I call my last name, which is Imbunya, that can tell a story about me. Someone will start guessing where that name is coming from, right? So the reason in Agile we focus on user story, which means that a story is only created if there is someone we're referring to. So we don't just say, okay, let us build a game software, or let us build, we need to say, hey, who is the person who will be using this game software? Are they kids between 3 and 4? Are they adult? Are they? So the user is very important because it defines what we're going to be doing in case of completing the work, right? So user story is a very important concept in Scrum or in Agile, and it helps us to be customer centric. One of the key words in Scrum, you're going to say Scrum is customer centric. We talk about flexibility, but the flexibility is centered around delivering value to our customer. So that is why the concept user story. Who is our customer? What is the story and what do they want? So based on who we are referring to, that help us to define exactly what we want to create for that person in order to receive satisfaction from that person. So a user story defines how we are going to do the work based on the end user. So the concept or an activity or a piece of work that we need to do is written in a voice called the user voice, and is written on what the user wants. And that is why when we talk about user story, you always hear, as a user, I want to so that I can get this business value. All right. Now, this takes us to our third point, which is about what? Story point estimation. If we talk about a user story, which kind of define what the user want us to do, and if we assume that we have a team of people that are doing the work, we need to estimate. We need to estimate what effort do they need to complete this work. So the effort that someone called a developer or someone need to complete a piece of work as defined by the user now lead us to where we need to do what we need to estimate the work. And the work is estimated in what we call story points. So when we talk about story pointing, it's a system which we can leverage to estimate how much effort is needed to complete a piece of work that has been written in the idea of the user. And when you talk about story point estimation, the first concept that should come to your mind is about t-shirt sizing, which is a method of estimation, about looking at the poker planning, which is a method of estimation, and the other method of estimation, but the most widely used, which I want you to pay attention, which you cannot go wrong, is the poker planning technique for estimating stories. And when we use the poker planning technique, it leverages the Fibonacci or the adjusted Fibonacci sequence, which roll from the number 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 20, 40, 100, infinity. All right. So this number are sequentially arranged and is based on previous experience, based on the Fibonacci sequence that help you to be able to estimate the effort that you need to complete a piece of work. So when we talk about story estimation, it's about how much effort do we need to complete this piece of work. All right, that's a third concept. Now, this also moves us to our fourth concept. You realize that the second concept, which is user story, the third concept, which is story estimation, and the fourth concept, which I want to talk about now, capacity allocation or capacity planning, all of these are already aligned. If we understand the story, which is about the work that we need to do, and then we estimate the effort that we need to do this work, the reason we need to estimate the effort is because we have people that need to do the work. And now the availability of those that will do the work is estimated in capacity. Now, look at the word capacity as if I look at this cup, okay, this is a mark. What is the capacity? Is about 8 ounces. So this cup can take about 8 ounces of coffee, right? Now, if I find a bigger mark, for instance, it might have a capacity of 16 ounces. But then when we're talking in relation to the people who are going to do the work, their capacity is their availability. And in Scrum, we have standards which set us or which guide us on how we should estimate this capacity. Scrum kind of recommend that for every sprint, which is 2-week sprint, we assign every person who is 100% available a capacity of 8 story points. Now, look at the capacity of 8 story pointers. There are 10 days in 2 weeks. We always consider that 2 days are for meetings and other stuff. So the active time available for every assigned developer is 8 days. And now, this is why you need to pay very attention, but this is the easiest way I can explain to you that if we have 8 days left, a story point is considered not equivalent to 1 day. A story point is not equivalent to 1 day, but in code, a 1 story point simply means that we can complete this in less than 1 day. Why is 1 story point not equivalent to 1 day? It's not equivalent to 1 day because when we talk about story pointing, it's about estimate. So if you're estimating, you cannot give exact. But then a day is a reference point to say, hey, if a story point is one story point, it means that we can complete this in less than a day. If it's somewhere around 5 story point, it means that somewhere between 4, 5, 6, 7 days we can complete it. But it's not like 5 story point means 5 days or so, but the equivalence to days guide you on how to allocate your story point. And if your team is new to estimation, what you do is that number one, you start by looking at the smallest piece of work within your backlog, which you can complete in less than a day, and you give that a story point of 1. Why? Because it's going to require an effort of less than a day to complete that. Now you estimate all that story point within your product backlog to be relative to the smallest one. That's the easiest way to help people understand what story pointing is all about. And I realized I just introduced a new concept called the product backlog, right? Which I'm going to take a bit of time to explain that as a bonus. Now, when we talk about a product backlog, it simply means that it contains all the work that needs to be done. So when we talk about a sprint, which is a defined period, it might be 2 weeks. Now we can estimate the work that we need to do for 2 weeks. And that is why we talk about capacity allocation and story point estimation to help us know what is the amount of work we can complete within a period of time. But the backlog contains every item. So the work that you need to pick out to complete comes from your product backlog. Okay, perfect. Now, let's move to the fifth term, which I want us to talk today, called technical debt. Technical debt. Now, when we talk about technical debt doesn't mean that you work on something and then you have an error which comes back for you to fix. Technical debt is something which is intentional, right? For instance, if I ask you, let's say that to say, hey, can you mop the floor or can you kind of move this from point A to point B and make sure that they are well arranged and well seated? You said yes. And you know that this is normally supposed to take you about 2 hours to do a perfect job. And let's say that because you're rushing, you want to complete the work in 1 hour, you're going to notice that although you will complete the work, you will not add perfection into it. Now, if I were to pay you, when I come and look at that work, I say, yeah, you moved it to the point where I wanted you to move it, but they're not arranged the way I wanted to arrange it. So because of that, I have the right to say, I'm not going to pay you because you did not, although you move it to point B, but it's not structured the way I want to. So for you now to receive your reward, you need to come spend extra time to arrange it or to adjust it the way it's supposed to. Now, let's look at it another way. Let's say you're a contractor and you've been given money to raise a building, a structure, and you hire someone and they come and build the walls of the house and they're not straight. And the person who is supervising comes and says, no, this is exactly not, this is not what I wanted it to be. And you already received instruction on what it should be. So all of this need to be corrected. What is going to happen at that time? You're going to pull down all of the structure to correct it. Now you've already spent materials and time and effort to put it up, but because it is disqualified, because you did not meet the standard, now that extra time is not paid for because it's not the fault of the customer, it's the fault of the technician. So when it's the fault of the technician, it's called technical debt. In a software environment, technical debt simply means, or sometimes occur because developer, they kind of rushing during the last days, so they don't actually build in enough quality. So when it actually get to the client realize, oh, although this was done, but it did not have the quality I wanted it to be. So they kind of send it back. Now, for those who also drive cars, right? You see some companies, sometimes they recall cars and say, hey, those who bought these models of cars between this period and this period, we need them back in the market. They realize a fault and now they take care of the charge of maybe rectifying the error free of charge. So that cost is called technical debt. Now it moves us to the sixth concept we'll talk about defect and bugs. Now, defects and bugs, let's say you buy a new car today, right? And then you start driving the car, and that car have a check light engine within the next 2 days, which was not supposed to be there. That is a defect or that is a bug. Now, if you take it back to the company, they will need to kind of detect what happened, because normally it should not happen. So it's a bug because we did it rightly, but then for some reason, there is a fault which we don't understand why that fault should be. So it comes back as a default. Now, in a software field, default might be like you build a login portal in which a person should put in their email and their password and automatically log in into their account. And for some reason, two people can log in, one person doesn't log in. That is a bug. There's something which you need to troubleshoot. Right. So bugs and defects are the same thing. Don't try to separate them. Some people always kind of say, you know what, a bug is when it has been completed and you put it back. No, don't make your life difficult. They are used interchangeably, right? Bugs, defect, they just like it normally should be working right, but there's an effect on that. And number 7, which is our goal for today, it's about performance indicator, performance metrics. Now, when we talk about performance indicators or performance metrics, I know as a Scrum Master, if you're thinking about the bend down chart, you start thinking about the velocity chart, you start thinking about the bend up chart, and also you start thinking about happiness index, which is what a lot of people always forget to talk about. Now, performance indicator or performance metrics simply means that how will you know if your team is doing well or not? What are some of the data you should look at? When you look at happiness index, or when you look at what I call evaluating based on observation and emotional intelligence, just imagine I'm facilitating an event, I'm working with a team, all right? And I realize that my team members are not communicating, or I realize that they are not moving their story across the board. I don't need any magic to understand that they're not going to end well. Just by observation, I can already tell what is going to be the end result. So I don't have to go to start looking at my bend down chart or my velocity chart to understand if my team is doing well or not, right? So sometimes people like just bypass, or to look at the performance of my team, I'm going to look at the bend down chart, the velocity chart. The first thing you look at, the first superpower point is your emotional intelligence, your ability to observe what your team is doing and to decode if they are doing it the right way or not. If you're able to do that, it helps you to evaluate the performance of your team. So looking at how to reach your bend down chart, how to reach your velocity chart, it's a ball game for another day, which I'm definitely gonna do it one of these days. But then remember, we're starting our next Scrum certification training Monday, 2nd of January. If you want to be part of that, shoot me a text. I'm gonna share you a link on how to enroll in that class. It's gonna be a super fun class. So much full energy, first class of the year. Trust me, you can never go wrong. But remember, if you're part of this community, thank you for always dropping a comment. Thank you for sharing. For those who are new, do not forget to subscribe. And for everyone, I say a happy 2023. Let's keep winning. The goal is to keep it simple. The goal is to believe in yourself. The goal is to tell yourself you can do it. And yes, I believe in you and you can do it. Okay. Thank you very much and do have a great rest of the week.